Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Vineyard Christian Fellowship, back on the internet. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Hope you were able to take some time to think of the things that you have to be grateful for and to be thankful for. This week, I spent a lot of time just missing everybody, just being one of those weeks that kind of come in every once in a while where since the lockdown and you just can't see people and you just really feel it. This week's been one for me. So I don't know about you guys, but I really look forward to being able to see you again and to worship together with you again. But let me just start off with a prayer. Father, you are who we want to be with. We want to be with one another, with you in the middle, and we're not able to do that right now, but we are able to be with you in the middle of who we are, in the middle of us right now, and knowing that in you we are all together. And so give us a sense of that as we not just worship you today, but as we move throughout the rest of this week and life in general. So thanks for being with us, and may the worship of our hearts be pleasing to you today, because that is why we are here. It's about you and not so much about us, but it's about you. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, everyone. Miss you all. Normally, we would all be here. We would be sitting, and we would have an open mic for people to come up and say what they're thankful for, the things that God has done for them this year. In my heart, as I was driving over here, I was like, oh, miss you all. And I was thinking, hey, wouldn't it be cool if everyone went on the Facebook page and put something in there? And that would be like sharing it. So if you are so inclined and you're watching this video, please leave a comment on things that you're thankful for so that we can share it at least virtually, if not in person together. So we want to acknowledge Brian Aldridge's birthday on the 5th, December 5th. So if you're in contact with Brian, or give him a text or give him a call, say happy birthday. Happy birthday, Brian. That's about it. So I want to invite you, Lord, to come be with us. Come, just let your presence settle on every household that is part of this little fellowship. It's your life and your love, your blessing that has brought us to this place, that continues to just sustain us through all the craziness. So we just ask you to come.
your kindness coming for all of us, Father, and have your way. As I was standing there listening to this song, I realized that our prayers, especially in times of change and uncertainty and newness, our prayers, or at least my prayers, are always so concrete. They don't take into account the fact that God needs to prepare us to receive the answers to our prayers, whether that be for a job, financial stability, healing. We actually don't know what it's like to live with that answer that He has for us. We actually don't know how to live in a place of His perfect goodness and what He's calling us into, because our vision is so short and our understanding is so short. And part of His kindness and His mercy and having His way with us is that He's taking the desires of our heart and He's preparing us for them. Because we don't know how much His goodness requires us to be able to live in that. And so as Lynn and Karen continue with this worship, think about the things that are on your heart that you're asking Him for an answer for. And keep your ears open to how He wants to change you to be able to live with that answer. Even though that answer is good and perfect and it's what you want. But you have to be ready for it. And that's part of God's perfect timing.
Where can I go from your presence? Where can I run from your spirit? You meet me there. Spirit, you meet me there. Where can I go from your presence? Where can I hide from your spirit? You find me there. Spirit, you find me there. From the highest highs to the lowest lows, from the find me there. From the highest highs to the lowest lows, from the mountain top to the valley below, you meet me here. Spirit, you meet me here. You go before me, your love surrounds me, changing the atmosphere.
Father, we trust you to prepare us for the good gifts that you have in store for us, for the answers to our prayers. Jean had an experience this past week. Actually, it's probably the second time in the same number of months where God answered this request in a very striking and, how would I describe it? Quick way?
Concrete,
Concrete?
rapid
Yes.
response.
Jean.
So there's this person who has been in my life as long as I have been with Lee. And this person, my relationship with this person has been a source of aggravation, a source of frustration, to a degree a source of fear. And this person is Lee's daughter, Juliana. We are polar opposites in every way you can imagine. Our senses of humor do not mesh at all. We've never been able to banter, have small talk, or even have any kind of genuine dialogue or conversation about anything. I mean, seriously. It's been contentious. It's been filled with friction. And there's no point in me going into, these things about her that generate these feelings in me and generate these reactions in me. There's no point in fact, I've already gone over that ad nauseum so many times in our SOCOM meetings, in our Thursday night small group, that I'm sick and tired of talking about it. But I have prayed for Juliana, and I've prayed for me to love Juliana. I mean, countless times since I've known her. Really to no avail. But something happened on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. I found myself talking about Juliana again in our SOCOM meeting, and after the SOCOM meeting, I could not sleep. I was thinking about Juliana. I was thinking about my inability to ever get to this point where I could genuinely love her, or even get to this point where I could genuinely like her consistently. I could like her for short periods of time, but it wasn't really genuine. I could not sleep on Wednesday night, and my heart hurt for Juliana. She lost her father when she was 16. My heart hurt for me my heart hurt for me that it was still so hard towards her after all the praying I've done, and after all literally begging God to help me to love this girl. And there was somewhat of a breakthrough, about a year ago. I had mentioned to Lee that, it was obvious that Juliana didn't like me. I had mentioned that to Lee, and Lee said, no, it's not obvious. I said, well, yes, it is, actually. If you just open your eyes, it's genuinely obvious that she doesn't really like me. And, a week later, I went over there, and Juliana was just really, 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 really nice to me. And she's been really, really, really nice to me ever since. But, it was obvious that it wasn't real. It was just a response to Lee telling Juliana what I said. But so Wednesday night, I'm laying in bed. I can't sleep. I'm almost in tears. I literally, my heart almost generated tears in my eyes about the whole situation, and I prayed more fervently than I ever had before for something to change between me and Juliana, You know, one thing, I've never ever prayed for Juliana to like me, or to love me, or to accept me. I mean, honestly, I've never really actually cared whether she liked me or not, right? She's vocal about what she believes, I'm vocal about what I believe, and therein lies this, right? But I've always prayed for me to love her, but I've never prayed for her to love me. Well, and I didn't on Wednesday night either, but I got to this point where, God, you know what? I've been asking you to help me love this girl. Now I got to spend all day Thanksgiving with her again. I mean, and a whole day. I never want to spend one more second with her than I have to. You know, if Lee leaves the room, it's like, oh, geez, here we go. You know, there's tension immediately. But I woke up Thursday morning, and I should have been aware of something had changed. Something was a little bit different because I slept better Wednesday night than I have I can't even remember the last time I slept this good. And I woke up in a frame of mind that was unusually positive, unusually happy, you know. I'm kind of I can be cranky in the morning. But anyway, so I get over to Lee's house, and Lee's upstairs getting dressed, and Juliana, I walk in, and I looked at Juliana, and something was different. Something was different immediately between her and I. It was stunning to me at that moment. But throughout the entire day, I looked at her and I could see genuine affection in her eyes towards me. I could see it. You know, when I was I don't want to make this too long, but when I was a child, my father would come home from work, and every single day I'd watch his eyes, to see if he noticed that, hey, you got a little son here who needs your attention. I looked for affection in my father's eyes for years and years and years, and I can read a person's eyes for affection like nobody else in the world, right? I could see affection in her eyes, but more importantly, the affection this sudden affection I had in my heart that had come to me overnight, I knew it was visible in my own eyes as well. I could feel it coming out like rays. It was bizarre. We bantered back and forth while Lee was getting dressed like we've never done before. Little jokes that we both laughed at, that we never have laughed together before. And this grew throughout the day. Lee would do something kind of funny, and Juliana would look at me and kind of give me this grin, and I would grin right back at her. And these things have never happened with us before, ever. And I went over there again yesterday and again today, and it's stronger than it was even on Thursday. And I mean, all I begged God for on Wednesday night was that I could truly love her, but I didn't realize this until maybe yesterday afternoon or this morning. God had brought me to this place on Wednesday night where I wanted to love her because I wanted to love her. Previous to that, I wanted to love her because I was supposed to. God expected me to love her. Lee expected me to love her. But God had brought me to this place where I genuinely wanted to love her because I wanted to love her. And I think that was the difference. It was like with Lee's neighbor that some of you might remember that I talked about. I got to this point with him where he was a real person. His name was Mark. She's a girl who has hurts and wounds and pains of her own. And I saw her for what she is. And it was just, Jim asked me beforehand, what I can attribute this to. I mean, it was miraculous. And nothing in the natural world can account for this. Nothing in this hard, rocky heart can account for it. And nothing in her heart could account for it either, because just trust me on that, right? So God made this change. All I wanted him to do was change me. I never asked him to change her. Just make me capable. And he did, but at the flip side, he changed her too. And she doesn't even believe in him, So anyway, I'm still, 2-3 days later, Lee caught me yesterday afternoon. Lee caught me in this moment. I was kind of over in this other part of the room, and I was like choking up, and she goes, "What's wrong?" And I go, "Nothing. There's nothing wrong." And she comes over, and she wouldn't believe me. So I told her, you know what? In a nutshell, I told her what I'm telling you guys right now. And you know what? The look in her eye was miraculous as well. So, I mean, there's something happening here that is beyond, that can only be attributed to God Almighty and the love of God and what He's capable of doing in our lives and our hearts. So that's it. Thanks.
All right, here we go. We're going to go with this message, same message I gave last week, but it got mysteriously erased in the night or in the day or sometime. And so hopefully you took the time last week to go back to one of the other previous messages to listen to that. But we're going to talk a little bit more about sufficiency being completed in love as the pathway to living a life without lack, a life without fear. We've talked a little bit over the past week or two about what love is, what love isn't, where it's found, what it looks like, where it comes from. The fact that God is love, not so much because He does loving things, but He does loving things because He is love. It's who He is. It's who Jesus was. When He walked this earth, He was a loving person. And so He didn't have to think about what the right thing to do, what the loving thing to do was, because it just was a natural, easy thing for Him to do. And the life that He brings to us is to change us from the inside out by nourishing us in His love, helping us grow up in the atmosphere, breathing in the very atmosphere of Him, of His love, so that we might be changed on the inside to become that kind of a person. So we pursue love, as 1 Corinthians 13 and then beginning in chapter 14. We don't pursue kindness necessarily. We don't pursue the patient part, all the things that love are. Those are the fruit, but we pursue the root, which is love. So at the end of 1 Corinthians 13, after giving a great picture of what this kind of love is, Paul tells the Corinthians so therefore pursue love, because when you become this kind of a person, these will be the kind of things that come out of you. So I mentioned how we wanted to move into looking at how this kind of looked at in the life of Jesus, certainly as in His heart of a servant, and how He gave that as a lesson for us to see, an example to live. So let's talk about that today. One of the telltale signs of those who live the life without lack is the freedom to serve others, because we need to be freed up to serve others, because when we are bound by trying to make things happen ourselves, or trying to make sure we're taken care of and we have no lack and it's up to us, our hands are full, our mind is full of trying to make things work out just right, and so therefore serving others, loving others has to go through this grid of us figuring out if it's really the best for us and where we fit in it in the kingdom of God, living under the freedom of God's love and the freedom of allowing Him to bring about the results of whatever's going on, and knowing that we're perfectly safe no matter what happens, whether we get what we want or don't. That frees us up not to worry about those things. We don't have to worry about providing for ourselves. We don't have to worry about fearing or anxiety. We can just love. We can just do good to others without any kind of a fear. There's a freedom to that. And from Jesus' perspective, there's no greater calling than to be just that, to be a servant. And whatever our place in life, no matter what position we are in, no matter what skills or abilities we have or don't have, as God's love fills and flows through us, which is the things we've been talking about for the past few weeks, how that happens, how we grow in that, how we nurture that, we will be engaged in caring for the welfare of others. And that's all loving one another really means. Doing the good of the one loved, looking out for the welfare of our neighbors, of the ones who are closest to us. Jesus, of course, is our master and our model. He's the one that we follow. And thinking about Jesus next to the passion events that end up in his crucifixion, there's probably no clearer and more powerful expression of Jesus' servant heart than what took place in the upper room just hours before his passion began. The scene is described in the 13th chapter of John. We've gone over that chapter 13 through 17, the Passover meal, the Last Supper, and then all of that which Jesus had but a short time to tell his followers before going to the cross. But the scene begins with these words. In verse 1, it says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." He loved them to the end. Now, John is clearly preparing his readers for a lesson in how Jesus loved them to the end. He's kind of setting it up here. Because for Jesus, this passion meal was the beginning of the end, was the beginning of this process that would end up on the cross and, of course, resurrection and ascension. He knew that in just a few short hours, he would be taken by the Roman soldiers and the priests who would lead them, and he would go through a lot of stuff, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and eventually laying down his life on the cross. Now, for a normal person like you or for me, we would be preoccupied with this knowledge. It would fill our thoughts, it would fill our minds. It would be hard to concentrate on anything else, knowing that we were just a couple of hours from going through this process. Think about Thanksgiving. Think about inviting a family over to your house to be a host and to put on a Thanksgiving meal. And as everybody started getting there, you knew that within just a few hours you would be beaten and you would be crucified. You would not be a very good host. You would not be thinking so much about, hey, can I get you something to drink? How's everything's going? Let's talk. What we would be doing, we would be thinking about what lay ahead in just the very near future. But when Jesus came to this moment, that's not what was filling his thoughts. He was thinking, now what would be the most important lessons for me to leave with my friends? He knew where he was going, and when he got here, he actually said, I'm glad, I've been looking forward to having this meal with you. He's thinking, I'm going to be off to die shortly. This is it. So what is the most important thing that I can tell my disciples, my followers, the ones that I love so much to the end? What is this last message that I can give them before I go? Well, John's narrative continues. He says this. He says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, he rose up from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. Now, this is faith. This is faith that is completed in death to self and faith that is completed in love. All three coming together, all three working together, all three being lived together in Jesus. It was trusting in God, knowing that he had come from God and he was going to God. There was this trust, there was this faith that was buoyed up by his death to self so that he was able to live out what he trusted God had told him to do for the reason of loving his disciples. Everything was in his hands. Everything. Everything was under his control, yet he was free to give it up because he was secure in his knowledge that he had come from God and was going to God. And it was in this confidence, this trust, this faith that he was prepared to do what he did. Whether it be in the upper room with his disciples or later in the garden, or in Pilate's hall, or all the way to being on the cross. So, as he was washing the disciples' feet, he comes to Peter, who, obviously troubled by what Jesus was doing, says, "Master, you shouldn't be washing our feet like this." And Jesus wasn't taken aback by his response, because he had been watching them. He had observed the dynamics of the little group and had decided to answer the question that was on everybody's mind, and yet nobody had spoken it. That question was, hey, who's going to wash our feet? Up to that point, their unspoken answer had unanimously been, not me, I'm not going to wash my feet. Whenever they walked into a house, the host would always wash your feet. Now, the feast had no host, and so this question was on everybody's mind, and yet nobody was going to bring it up. So they just went along their way, not washing their own feet or helping anybody else with theirs. So, everyone having answered their question by their silence, that they weren't going to do it, they were ready, they were set up for this essential lesson that Jesus wanted to give them on love, beginning this evening with them. So Jesus engaged in serving them. How? Well, by washing their feet, but really what he was doing was he was meeting their needs, which is how we love one another, is how we love our neighbors, by meeting their needs. And really, he met their needs in two parts. There was two sets of needs that he was addressing, that he was helping them with. There was one outward. That was the first one, and that was the obvious need for clean feet. In those days, feet really needed to be washed. Unlike today, you may have in your house come home and take your shoes off, but then, in those days, they didn't have that luxury. They walked in and their feet were dirty, and it is actually supposed to have been done and should have been done before the meal, because in that time they ate reclining, and when you reclined, there was lots of noses next to other people's toeses. And if you had not washed your feet, it kind of took away from the meal experience. Now, it would have been nice if the feet had been washed and anointed before the meal, but the disciples had been unwilling to stoop down, pun intended, to do that. And this showed that they had a far deeper need than just dirty feet. And this was the second part of their lesson on love. This was their second need that Jesus served them on, the inward need, the need of their heart, the way that they lived their life, the person who they were. They needed to learn about the servant heart of love. Apparently, even after Jesus showed them by washing their feet, they still didn't understand, which was pretty typical when Jesus taught them a lesson. And it's pretty typical when Jesus teaches you or I a lesson. We don't always, if even usually, understand right away. And it takes some explanation for us to get the point. And so he wants to make sure they get the point. So the story goes on in John 13. It says, "So when he had washed their feet, taken his garment and sat back down again, he said to them, 'Do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, wash your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than the one who sent him.'" Then he finishes it off by saying this, "If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." It's all, Jesus always, at the end of the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 7 of Matthew, he says, he gives the story about the wise man and the foolish man, building the house. The wise one is the one who hears and does. In the same way, he says, if you know these things, if you have learned these things by experience and you know these things, you know that this is what love is all about, then blessed or well off are you if you do them. If you don't do them, this does not only does you no good, but probably makes things worse for you because you know what to do and you're not doing them. But he's saying, so I've given you this lesson. I've not only told you, but I've shown you. Because sometimes we need more than just being told. We need to be shown. And he says, and if you know these things, if you do these things, you will be blessed. You will be well off. You will be living the life that I have come to give. One way we've responded to this story is to have foot washings as ceremonies, often, depending on your denomination, during the Passover, the Passion Week, the Thursday, the day before Good Friday, because that's the day that Jesus did that on. Other denominations have done them on, say, New Year's Eve. Other groups have done them at various times during the year. And while these services can be meaningful, most often the main benefit is for the person who is doing the washing rather than the one who is receiving it. This is mainly because there's no unmet need being addressed. The recipient's feet are really not in need of washing. So this foot washing becomes more of a symbolic way of being humble, being the one who's washing the feet is a thing of humility, and which, while this is certainly a praiseworthy virtue, it is not really the point that Jesus is making here. He was actually helping people, addressing a real need in their lives. And at the same time, knowing Jesus and watching Jesus, he was delighting in them. He was doing it because he loved them. He liked them. He wanted to be able to do things to help those that are around him. And he loved to relate to them in meaningful ways. He just didn't do things to be symbolic. He did things that were practical and needful and helpful, all to meet a need and to promote their well-being, which is what it means to love someone, to love your neighbor, to promote their well-being. If somebody needs something and you are in position to be able to help them with that, then you do that. That is loving your neighbor as yourself. You remember the story, the quibble question when he asked the question of what's the greatest commandment? He talked about loving God, but loving your neighbor as yourself. And the person kind of like you and I go, well, who really is my neighbor? He says, then he gives the story of the Good Samaritan. And it's this person that he doesn't know, but he runs into. The person has a tremendous need, and he stops what he's doing, and he meets that man's need to the point where he not only fixes him up, but he sets him up at an inn and leaves instructions on how to take care of him. And the story is to show that it's not just the people that you know and like, it's anybody who's in your sphere of influence who you are close to, helping them, meeting their needs, promoting their well-being. That's what it means. And so it's in this sense or context that we should listen to and hear the next words that he says, which is this: a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Now, what was new about this commandment? Because it's not the first time they had heard it before. Jesus was essentially saying, listen, you have heard about love ever since Moses, a long time ago, told you to love your neighbor as yourself. That came down from Moses. But I'm showing you what this really means. You are to love one another with the same concern that I have loved you. Do that, and it will be obvious to you and everyone else that you are my disciples. Now, stop for a moment and think about that. You are to love one another with the same concern with which I have loved you. Do I love one another? Do I love you? Do I love those who are close to me in proximity? Do I love you and them with the same concern that Jesus has shown to me. If I did this, if we did this, it would be obvious to everyone near and far that we were his disciples. Now, the newness of the commandment lies in this new kind of love that Jesus was demonstrating. A love that flows freely and easily from his God-rooted and God-nourished resources. Now, when we love like this, it's not the result of human effort, but of the radical with Godness that we have in him. It's a gift of God. This is what we've been talking about for the past couple weeks. It is not something that we muster up. It is something that someone who we become. And we become that kind of person from being with God, from turning our thoughts to things above, from being transformed by the renewing of our mind, from looking up into the face of God, even though that may seem strange, we practice doing it. We think of God as a parent, a mother or father who is just staring down at their child and communicating love and infusing love into that child, even though that child does not understand a word of what is being said. They are being formed by the love, the tangible love that is flowing from the parent to the child. And in the same way, that's why the blessings that are in the Bible, we ask that the Lord would have his face upon us, that we would realize that God's face is always looking at us. And even if we don't understand the communications that are coming to us from him, but we would turn our attention to him and to meditate on him and to think about him and to think about the things that we know that are true and noble and good and praiseworthy, that we would fix our mind on those things and keep the Lord always before us. That those are the things that draw us into him, so that his love comes into us and changes us on the inside and changes us into these kind of people. It's a gift from God. Only Jesus has the power to transform and fulfill a human personality. Only Jesus enables his followers to be able to live a selfless, joyful, and anxiety-free life lived in loving service on the behalf of others. This is the message of the gospel that we so often forget or never even heard. We need to offer this matchless kind of life to other people. We need ourselves to be asked, would you actually like to live like this? Would you? Would I actually like to live this kind of a life? Would I want to be possessed by this kind of a love? You can be. I can be. God will give it to you, and when he does, the things that Jesus and Paul say about love will begin to be realized in your life. Not because you did it, but because you welcomed it. You welcomed love in and let it nourish you and grow in you and take possession of you. While it is good to know that love saves us, which it does, it is equally true that love is meant to enter into our lives, into our hearts, into our minds, into our bodies. Every aspect of who we are is supposed to be filled with this love. We are to be temples of the Holy Spirit, sacred spaces in which God dwells or in which God lives, that he would be in us just as we are in him. He is the Spirit of love who desires to reside within me and to reside within you. And doing that, he empowers us to love as he loves by changing us to be like he is. When the gospel of Jesus Christ is fully proclaimed, it includes offering this kind of life to people. The opportunity to be able to love people, all people, just like Jesus does. And then after having that offered, we must decide if that is something that we want. And if we truly want love like that, God will give it to us. But if we do not choose to become as loving as Jesus, we will never know a life without lack. So don't wonder why you have a life that is full of lack or full of fear if you have not chosen to become like Jesus. Because that road is the only road that will bring us to this kind of life. Such a life is made real through God's love filling our lives. Such a life is made real through God's love filling our lives. Faith is only completed in love because our faith is in a God of love, no other. And the more this faith grows in us, the more we will experience the carefree joy of Christ's love, and we get the life that he came to give us. So I'm going to stop there. Once again, I hope that this has given you enough to take a day or two and chew on and think about, talk about, and process. Ask God to come walk with you through this and see what that means for you. So I bless you, and I pray that the Lord's face would shine upon you, and that this week you would trust Jesus, that you would do good, and that you would wash your hands.